There was a time when Nebraska's D was so feared and so respected that what they had been accomplishing for almost 30 years before would be recognized with its own signature uniform. I'm not sure if the low point was in 2007 when Todd Reesing threw 6 touchdowns and Kansas put 76 on the board, or if it was in 2014 when I sat in the stands and watched Melvin Gordon run for over 400 yards in just 2.5 quarters, or if it was against Georgia Southern. Somewhere along the line, it went left and nobody knew how to fix it. Fast forward past the nonsense and Matt Rule shows up. He recognized the brand power of the black shirts and saw that the best teams in the Big Ten all played great D. He needed somebody proven, somebody who could restore the pass rush, stop the run, and lean on his secondary now that more pass-heavy offenses are joining the conference. His new DC was successful in the Pac-12 and then in the ACC, but his toughest challenge yet is less than a month in front of him. So today, I'm giving you my prediction for the entire starting defense and what the rotation could look like Game 1 against Minnesota. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, hit the subscribe button below so you don't miss any of the videos I drop. And if you want my full season record prediction, hit the like button and help us get to 1,000. But now, let's get into it.
Thompson winds up, goes deep, got a man! Touchdown!
Today, Oregon and Washington announced that they're joining the Big Ten and that they'll be a part of the conference in 2024. And people ask for my thoughts, but I don't really have any that I haven't shared. It's great that they're adding more quality, and both of those teams have been hot for a while. But until we know if divisions are coming back or if Nebraska is going to have to play any of the West Coast teams more often since it makes more sense logistically, it's just another day in the ever-changing Super Conference era. The question is, what happens to the ACC and the Pac-12 once we have the Big Three? Does the ACC absorb the American and the Pac-12 absorb the Mountain West? If you're Oregon State or NC State or any of these other top 25 contending schools without a big enough fan base, you're kind of getting screwed now that you lose your in-state rivalries and you've got to play a way weaker schedule. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I can't change any of it, so I'm just going to appreciate what I get, and I'm going to enjoy watching every second of it. In my last video about the offense, I didn't share the stats from Satterfield's South Carolina team, and I argued that they didn't matter since Mark Whipple's Pitt offense was light years ahead of where he had Nebraska ranked last year. But Tony White's history is different. His defense is ranked pretty high everywhere he's been, so let's do a comparison just on last season. But keep in mind, Nebraska had Bill Busch, who was trying to salvage what was left, and White was in year 3. Total defense, 21st versus 100th, which was still 22 spots higher than Oklahoma. Total sacks, 40th versus 99th. Red zone D, 72nd versus 120th. And scoring D, 40th versus 77th. Nebraska played the 36th toughest schedule and Syracuse played the 39th. So even though one team played in a weaker conference, the competition was pretty similar. And side note, Syracuse held Purdue to less than 30 and they won that game. I'm not saying we should expect them to jump 80 spots in this first season, but at least Rule brought in a coach who's proven it in the Power 5 already. Now let's talk about who's on the roster. At first, we assumed there'd be 8 returning starters, but with Farmer out and Buford still recovering from the knee injury, we're only going to see 6 returners from last year play in that first game. But the talent this staff brought in might actually fit the new scheme better. Right now, it's safe to say 4 transfers are going to play a big role. MJ Sherman from Georgia, Elijah Judy from Texas A&M, and both Chief Borders and Corey Collier from Florida. None of those guys played much at their last school, but all 3, outside of Sherman, had only been in the program for 2 years before they realized that they might be a better fit somewhere else. Then you add in 2 true freshmen on the D-line who already look the part, and that's a solid group of 6 newcomers who can make an immediate impact. On special teams, 3 names stick out. True freshman kicker Tristan Albano, who's battling last year's starter for the job, Marco Ortiz, who transferred him from Florida as a long snapper, and Billy Kemp from Virginia as a punt returner. That unit already took a step forward under Bill Busch and jumped from 129th to 59th nationally last year, so hopefully they can make an even bigger move with the new faces. This week we got to hear from the DC and multiple players, and the general takeaway was that he wants the defense to play fast and not worry about making mistakes. They recruit guys who can move well and who are athletic enough to cover lost ground if they slip up. So, seeing the play unfold and reacting naturally is what they're trying to accomplish. On offense, we'll know who the key pieces are and which few players are going to be expected to contribute the most as ball carriers. But on defense, it sounds like the approach is different. There will be a starting 11 that walks onto the field for the first drive against Minnesota, but there will be other formations mixed in, and we'll see a bunch of guys rotate as starters in those other fronts. If you go back to what Rule said in the spring presser, something along the lines of seeing the same 11 play on D all game would make him lose his mind, we can assume there are going to be close to 20 who get in the game that can play multiple positions and keep the offense guessing the entire time. And that all sounds great, but it makes this prediction harder. So I'm just going to do my best to go over who I think sees the field the most and run through where I expect everybody to play. So let's start this off with safety. And instead of going by each of the two spots, we'll just talk about the main four I expect to rotate in at both positions. Miles Farmer and Marquise Buford were solid last year, but Farmer wasn't down with the new culture, and Buford's not going to see the field till he's 100% healthy. And at this point, who knows when that's going to be. If we go based on experience, which I prefer to since I don't get to watch this month's practices, Omar Brown probably has the most, but he wasn't that consistent last year, which makes me question if he can lock down that number one spot. Corey Collier ran with the first team during the spring game, and it sounds like he's in position to lock down a starting job, which leaves Singleton to battle it out with Brown. As a JUCO recruit coming out of Hutchinson in Kansas, he was the fourth highest rated safety in the entire class. And after getting warmed up in 6 games last season, I'd guess he gets the first look with Collier. Phelan Sanford's a former walk-on who ended up being a solid contributor on special teams before he broke into the rotation. And he's a senior who will take on any role the coaches give him. So I'm expecting him to be involved in that rotation at safety. The number one rover's easy since Gifford's a returning starter who's played a ton at nickel. He finished third on the team with 70 tackles in 2022, and Rules pointed out that he's one of the veteran leaders that they can count on. Behind him, I'm a bit confused, hence the gap. I would have thought Farmer switched over, but now I'm not sure which vet they're going to play there. Javen Wright started working with the linebackers, and the only other two we know play rover are Stanger and Fields. I'd go with Stanger as the 2 at this point and hope Fields can get comfortable enough to play early too. But I think Isaac Gifford might be the most important player in the entire secondary since he's got the least amount of experience behind him. At corner, Tony White's got to be feeling great. Newsome's a multi-year starter, NFL prospect, and on the other side, Hartzog showed he's got a bright future and could probably develop into a pro too. Hartzog's a better fit at safety, and the staff would rather play him there, but is Tommy Hill or Javier Morton ready to take on a starting role yet? I'm not sure. Both of those guys are going to have to play, and Hill fits the description for a guy who will play fast, so as of today, I'd say if Hartzog had to help out at safety, Hill would be the third best option to start in this group and could fit in opposite of Newsome like he did before. The linebacker room is going to be interesting to watch. Reimer's the number 1 and has the history to back it up. He's a consistent tackler and comes up with big plays as often as anybody. In 32 games, he's logged 245 tackles, 4 sacks, and 6 total turnovers. Henrich had a really strong 2021, but fell off a little last year before his season ended early with an injury. John Bullock's been one of the biggest stories in the offseason. The staff loves him, and his name comes up all the time. I don't want to say Henrich is going to lose the job since I think all 3 of those guys are going to rotate, but my guess is Reimer and Bullock are the first 2 on the field. Javen Wright's a question mark. He bounced back after dealing with injuries that we thought could have forced him to retire. Now he switched from DB to linebacker, and my guess is he'd play inside since there's less depth there. Does that mean he beats out Micaiah Bayer, or am I missing something, and could he end up lining up at Jack? Playing Jack might be tough because you got some studs in that room. MJ Sherman's got the top spot locked down, and even though he dealt with some setbacks at Georgia and mostly played on special teams, he's the perfect fit in Tony White's scheme. Chief Borders is another SEC transfer who hasn't gotten to play much, but he should be the number 2 in front of Jamari Butler and Maverick Noonan, who's coming in as a true freshman. The common theme here? A bunch of special teams experience, but almost no history playing significant roles on defense in college. Fortunately, at tackle and nose, there's a lot more proof. Ty Robinson's the undisputed number 1 tackle, and Nash Hutmacher will lock down the nose. Robinson started 23 games, and he's been a staple on the line since 2020. Hutmacher played in every game last year, starting in 2, and finished with 15 tackles. Elijah Judy's a transfer from A&M who rotated on the line in the spring game, and right up there with him is Ruquan Buckley, who's now in the best shape of his life according to coaches. Hutmacher looks leaner, Robinson's always looked the part, and now that the other guys are in Big Ten shape, hopefully somebody has a breakout year and can get to the quarterback. Blaze Gunnerson should take the starting job at end, but again, there's not much to look back on outside of special teams play. Lenhart and Princeville are 2 true freshmen who shined in the spring game and are going to earn early playing time. And behind them is Kai Wallen, who ranked in the top 40 as a JUCO recruit after he recorded 33 tackles and 5 sacks last season. One of the most anticipated battles of the offseason is at kicker, where true freshman Tristan Alvano gets to go at it with Timmy Bleekrod. I'm going to say Alvano wins the job since it doesn't sound like the coaches were too impressed with Bleekrod in the spring. And Alvano has NFL potential and proven ability in Memorial Stadium, as we learned last year in the state championship game. When Frost was hired in 2018, he went with a true freshman in Barrett Pickering. He wasn't as big of a recruit as Alvano, but he had a solid season, going 40 of 41 on PATs and 14 of 18 on field goals. If Rule got a similar stat line out of Alvano this year, I'm sure he'd be happy with it. At kick returner, I'm going with the guys who we know are practicing there or who've done it before, and both Betts and Grant are vets in that department. We heard Betts is one of the fastest receivers, so if the coaches want speed, he could be a go-to. I have no clue if Fleeks is going to cut weight and get back with the team, or if he's just not fit for what they got going on this summer. But if he does make it back, I'd expect him to compete for that role too, since he probably won't be a staple on the offense. There's not much to say about punter other than Buschini's one of the best in the Big Ten. On 68 attempts last season, he had 14 downed inside the 20. 16 went longer than 50 yards, and he averaged 44 yards per punt. That average ranked 25th nationally, and there were a few weeks when he wasn't even fully healthy. You hate to see him punt, but at least they've got somebody they can trust to pin teams deep. The number 1 punt returner is going to be Billy Kemp, who ranked 36th nationally in 2021 when he averaged over 6 yards per return, which doesn't sound like much. IGC's been practicing there too, but I'm just hoping they can find the next Demorne Pearsonell and have a legit threat to take one to the house at least a couple times a year. I'm all in on the 3-3-5 and any other formation that Tony White's run in the past that works, even though there are plenty of doubters looking for a reason to say Nebraska's going to suck. I'd guess there's a bit of a learning curve early since there are so many new faces on the field together and the defense is so much different from what they played in before. But as long as they can play fast and be physical, the size and talent they're working with should be enough to cause problems for every one of those first 4 teams they line up against. But I want to know what you think. Is there a safety here who can replace Miles Farmer's production, or do you think that spot falls off a little? Do you think MJ Sherman ends up a more effective edge rusher than Mathis or Nelson were last year? And who do you think ends up taking the job at kicker? I know everybody loves Alvano and wants to see him win, but I don't know how tough it'll be as a true freshman with so much pressure on the road in the Big Ten for his first game action. But that's all I've got for today. So until next time, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Big Red.